Good morning. Welcome to Morning Jump Start, some student feedback. Today we're going to take a look at a landscape in the style of the Hudson River School. And time permitting, we may even look at an eagle in flight. These paintings were submitted. They're framed and very nice as they are. But what I'm going to offer is, what's next? Or if you were going to do this again, what are some things you might change or tweak or how to look at it? So it's up to the people whether they want to take these and apply it to the painting I'm actually talking about. But whenever I talk, I'm trying to give general lessons on general principles. So whether you apply it to this painting or the next painting doesn't really matter. But I'm trying to introduce to you and get you familiar with the principles, the visual principles of painting. All right, so with that said, why don't we just jump in and get going? I'm anxious. I'm excited about this today. So let's jump over to the iPad and get going this morning. Please let me know you're here. Say hello. Let me know what you think, if it's helpful or not in the comments. And as always, be sure to like the video, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel. Okay, as I said, we've got a beautiful landscape here, and so let's just take a moment to appreciate what's happening, right? A real sense of light in there, and the drama of the dark and the light, with the mountains, right? And implied is that rough wilderness, that wild land, natural, untamed. Okay, so now that you've had a chance to look at this a bit, oops, I'm in the wrong program. Let's get over, still last night's program up there. All right, my apologies. I got called away in the middle of that, and I obviously didn't fix it, but we'll just send that right to Procreate. And a hop, skip, and a jump. And we're there. Okay, so what do you see? Right, it's real important if you want to get the most out of these talks or lessons or whatever, that you actively engage and not passively participate. But what do you see? And sometimes if we reorient ourselves in relation to the painting, that can be easier to see. So let's call our attention to a couple of things. So it seems like this is a pretty important spot right there. And although it's not exactly, it's a little close to half. Okay, so what that's going to do is it's going to give a very, very stabilizing effect. And when you're painting a waterfall, stabilization isn't necessarily the thing we're looking at. Usually waterfalls imply a lot of energy and activity. So we might want to consider that. And then what about this way? Again, they're not exactly the same, but it's close. Okay, so one of the things I'm going to do is suggest ways in how we can kind of activate those spaces. And what do I mean by activate? Oops, I almost got myself in trouble there for forgetting to layer up. I might need an extra cup of tea in the morning before I get going. There we go. What do I mean by activate? Well, as right down the center stabilizes things, right? If that line was, say, here, now things are a bit more unstable. Unstable. What is that? Is that, or the common word that's used is dynamic. Dynamic. Well, look who's here. Good morning, Janny and John. Mrs. John. Okay, so I'll think about, and would I want to raise or lower that? In other words, would I want to take this and send it this way or send it that way? Well, it depends on what your painting is about. If my painting was about the waterfall, I'm probably going to send it up this way. If I want to talk about some big mountain peak way in the distance, well, then I might drop that waterfall down to give more room for that. So I hope that makes sense. And then as far as this line goes here, I think what I'm going to do again is try to make it a little more dynamic. And I don't know, naturally I kind of want to go this direction. And it doesn't seem like a lot is happening here in the painting. Right? It's, if we just took that whole thing out. So let's take advantage of that space and change this movement by making that thing maybe go a little more diagonal and maybe even coming over this far. Or, you know, suit yourself. What do you want? And we're going to be coming up here too, aren't we? So that's one thing I'll be looking at, and what that'll do is then this waterfall will have more of a diagonal cascade rather than necessarily straight down. And I know that this is a place, but if we just generally change our position a little bit, and what do I mean like by that? Well, if we were actually standing there looking at this waterfall, or at this point we'd be, if somebody tipped us over and we're laying on the parking lot looking at the waterfall, this might be the view. But what would happen if somebody took you by the feet and dragged you 10 feet this way? Or put you on a platform and raised you as the viewer up? Well, what happens when you do these is all these proportions change, right? What would it look like if you were on your belly looking from the ground at this thing versus if you were like 30 feet in the air? So sometimes when we go to paint an actual place, we can think that we're locked in where we're actually not. All right, that seemed like a lot of talking, about 10 minutes worth. So why don't we get to drawing a little bit? And one other thing besides trying to create a little more dynamic movement in here with more dynamic proportions is related to yesterday, the lady sitting at the counter at the bar in a cabin. What we want to do is, I'm going to make sure to use this right here. This is foreground. And what I'm going to use that foreground for is to really set that rock up. No, I just lied to you. And I lied to you on purpose to make a point that I'm not painting this rock. but I need to set up a color and a value that can go from near to way the heck back there. And so if I'm thinking about this in terms of, look, this is setting the foreground here so that the background can be way, way, way back there. What are the things that are going to cause that to come forward? Well, one of them is chroma, right? More color, darker, richer value. So if we say this is in the orange family here, and I don't know, there may be particular rocks there, but wherever that is, the light on there, and again, it depends what you're wanting to do. If you're wanting to silhouette it, but what if I started with something like that? And right now that seems way, way too much. I get it. But what that's going to do is give you lots of room to gray that color off. All right, so even that seemed a little bright for me though. Let's see. So if you want to keep it more naturalist, maybe like the Hudson River School, then maybe the color would be slightly, you see how I took a little bite out of that? And then I don't worry about it. Let me show you why I don't worry about it. Now we're going to move this up here, remember? And we're going to move it over there. So what I might do is I actually might have this foreground rock cut in like that. And something else I know to do, I know we want to say the height of this, but one way to do that is to show how much bigger this foreground is than this background. Can we get this front rock? Could it come up to here? And if it did that, well, that waterfall is going to fall down here, but then this one rock versus this entire cliff, and that those proportions are going to make it seem like, wow, there must be a lot of distance. Because look, this rock is so big, and that cliff, I mean, made up of what? Thousands of rocks? Right, so do you see what happens there? You're setting things up. You're setting things up, and that's why it's real important to decide exactly what your painting is about before you start. So with those ideas in mind, ask away or do what you will, but I'm going to turn on my painting brain here, and I'm going to lay some of this down so that we can see if I'm not giving you any good advice or not, right? You got to check it out. If it's important to you, you're going to have to find out for yourself. So what would happen? And again, I know this is a particular place, but what if that rock started over here and came down? So what if we did something like that? Look at a bird stat or something and basically measure. Find something in the foreground and then compare it to the distance. And it's really amazing because it's a shocking thing, because they've done such a convincing idea of telling you how large that mountain is back there, that's no way that's smaller than your thumb, right? Where this little rock that we don't even look at is bigger than your head. But if you look at that, you'll see it and you'll find it. So it may do something like that. And then again, remember, we want to send them through space now. So then what would my next cliff look like? What would that value be? And let's see. Where were we going to go? We're going to go up something like this here. So look, what did I say about the size of this cliff compared to the size of the rock? Ooh, and so now, and what I'm doing is I'm breaking down all the elements basically of perspective and of action. The movement's going to give us the action, and then really to get that perspective that we can see just miles and miles and miles back there, we have to employ the tools of the artist. And in this case, it's bigger to smaller, right? And again, we want the opening of that to be small and then weaves out, and then maybe it gets bigger. So this could be the other side of the cliff and the rocks here that we see. And so with the shape of the rocks, look how I've left a dynamic runway for that waterfall. Okay, I'm going to go a little fast. I'm going to try to get to where I actually send some of this into space. And so if that blue water is up front, what is that blue that we want? Again, I'm doing big block shapes. We'll have to adjust it, but I might put that blue right there. Maybe that water, right? Because we're really looking down on that too. And of course, it splashes. Okay. So how are we doing on time there? 20 minutes like this. And again, let that get smaller and smaller, smaller as that goes back. And bigger and bigger as it comes forward, more or less. Right, and there's probably rocks in there that this is real. You want to make sure not to straighten it up. We've got the tendency to straighten it up. I have it too. We all have it. There we go. And then, let's see, what would be next then? And so if we were just to keep taking this back into space here, even kind of the side of the cliff, and then maybe this is a little further back. Or the top right there. And then let's go. Look Look how yellow that looks on there. But see, then we can walk it back into space. Oops, pressed a little hard. Okay, and that's all it takes to take that two-dimensional kind of diagonal line then and work it. So if you guys didn't quite understand what I did there, let's have a look. All right, so we've got our first forward rock, and I don't have any light or shadow or anything on it. I'm just thinking about masses. Okay, and that's this big. Boom. And then we've got a whole cliff, right? That's basically going vertical on both sides. And then we could reach like a top of the rocks. And I know it's not going to be plains like grass, but we can further break this up. And then this goes back into space. And then when you see a dark again, what does that do? That goes up. When you see a light, that goes back, up, back, up. And if you'll make those smaller and smaller, then boom, just takes them back into space. For the tree, then I'm going to do the same thing. Let's go back here though first. Where did I end up? Was I back here? So then what would that color look like way off in the distance? It may start releasing into something like that. All right, look at that dark out of there. And then when you bridge these, oops. When you bridge these, that'll give that stuff that's back there even more of that look of distance. Okay, is that making sense? Is that making sense? And then what are we going to do with this tree? Well, it's the same story with the tree. So this foreground tree, what I want to use it for, and the other thing is we want to make really sure that the direction of the light is constant. I'm not sure that I would put that tree up in that corner like that. Now you could design it in such a way, but especially since our waterfall is doing this now, I think this foreground tree, I would use that more just a silhouette and to set up, hold it more as a strong silhouette, and then set up those trees in the background. And what keeping it as a silhouette does is it'll let you fly past that and then really see that light in the background. And by this just being a dark silhouette, it will accentuate the light in the background. Now, I'm not saying this can't be a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful silhouette. You could take a lot of time but what purpose is it serving for this painting? Not I copied it or it was there so I put it in, but for this painting, what purpose is it serving? And once you start thinking about that, it gets frustrating for a while because you can get stuck. But once you start going, man, you're thinking in terms of paint and you're moving in terms of paint. So to me, that already really sets up that background, right? That huge space. Okay. And then what do we do with that? Well, we take that and we put it through air. Pretty close, but right? Or if we need a couple of maybe maybe this isn't so far back there. Right, again we're giving them things to land on in space. And we want them to realize how long it's going to take them to walk back to that point. They're going to need probably more than a lunch. It's way over there. Way over there. Then again, smaller for our next bunch. And so on. Now, and I would make those smaller still too. And maybe there's right, some over here. Something like that. And so I'm just about out of time. So I hope that helped and made sense. And before we go on, so let's look at a before and after. And again, I'm talking about these primary movements. Now look at what I just did. Gosh darn it. Gosh darn it to heck. Right? We had talked about the waterfall kind of being like that to start with. And then I said, give it a diagonal. But look what I did with that diagonal. Whoop. Whoop. Okay. So if you can get that kind of going outside that maybe and spilling over and maybe coming this. Again, then that's a more dynamic movement and a slower movement, which means they'll spend longer on the waterfall traveling through it, and so it'll be a more satisfying experience. Okay. So, like I said, really beautiful as it is, but if we were going to start this again or do a new one or next time, some of the things we might think about is not keeping that waterfall so close to the center, both horizontally and vertically, giving it more of a diagonal so it's more of a dynamic shape, and then using foreground rocks and trees as places to strike strong, or at least your richest, strongest kind of values and colors, so that you have room to walk back into space. Oops. Okay, you see how that kind of makes things a little more dynamic there? So I hope that made sense. Okay, and then we are out of time, but before we do that, oops, I dropped the ball again. You guys are just getting a tour of all my stuff. Here we go. Send that to Procreate. Hop over there ourselves. Okay. So, hats off that you had the bravery to do this. I don't know that I have the bravery. An eagle in flight. Wow. But fantastic. Fantastic. With the same sort of things that we have in mind, what I might do is I always want to ask, what am I seeing? And here we see the white, right? We see the white. The tails have got it. And then in the background, right, the lighter stuff is taking us like that. So I feel the composition is basically like that, and then we're getting kind of smaller circles in there. Okay, which is good. It can be confusing sometimes when you're doing these action things as to what exactly causes the action. And I'm going to propose, again, you're not going to be very happy with me probably, that we got too much of a stack here. Is it literally stacked on top of one another? No, but it's pretty tight. So how could we make that more dynamic? And just like the waterfall, I would try to design those white things as more of an angle there, right? Because even though we've got a bit of it happening here, the white is what the viewer sees. Right, and even, you know, see what we have, and then over here, now this is a little bit off, but it's just a little too close. So I would try to design that so that that was more dynamic. Okay, well, I hope you guys found that helpful. This ends our first full week. If you want a chance to have something of yours looked at, you're welcome to send it in. I'm going to have to skadoodle. Is that a word? Is that a thing? Skadoodling? There we go. Oops, what happened there? Oh, here we go. Boom. I'm going to skadoodle off to class. I will be back today at 1:30 for studio time. And I'll be back tonight for Masterworks, a look at the masters. For the month of December, I will be going live 3 times a day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, here on YouTube, our YouTube channel. Mornings will be morning jump starts, student feedback. Afternoons will be me in the studio working. And in the evenings, we'll look at some Masterworks. So, for free, it's quite an arts education you could get, and you could get a jump start on your own work and take a leap in your own work if you'll tune in 2 or 3 times a week and catch that stuff. So when we settle into winter, why don't we get better at painting? Skadoodle. And my beautiful wife is telling me that in a box somewhere in one of these corners is red. If you press on that, that will subscribe to us. How fancy are we getting? Awesome. All right, guys. Join me again. Thanks so much. Much love to you. And we'll talk to you guys again soon. Bye-bye.